Anthony Todt was born on September 29, 1975, in a small town in Pennsylvania. He grew up in the family of Robert and Loretta Todt, and the first years of his life, at first glance, were no different from the lives of other children. However, everything changed when he was only 5 years old. In 1980, his father was arrested for the attempted murder of Anthony's mother. Robert Todd, a teacher and coach, was accused of organizing an attack on his wife and sentenced to prison. This tragedy left an indelible mark on little Anthony's life and became one of the first trials he had to face. Despite the difficult circumstances, Anthony showed incredible resilience and commitment to success. He did well in school, was single-minded, and dreamed of a career that would allow him to help others. Perhaps his desire to become a physical therapist was due to an early understanding of the value of support and recovery from injuries, both physical and emotional. School teachers remembered Anthony as a kind and hardworking student who always tried to prove himself at his best. He was an active participant in school events and showed an interest in science, especially biology. It was this interest that later determined his professional path. After graduating from high school, Anthony enrolled at Sacred Heart University in Connecticut, where he began studying physical therapy. This decision was fateful. Here he met Megan, who studied at the same faculty. Megan was an intelligent, charming, and ambitious girl who, like Anthony, aspired to success in her fields. Their relationship began with friendship, which quickly turned into an affair. They spent a lot of time together, discussing their dreams and making plans for the future. They shared a common desire to help people, and it soon became clear that they were perfect for each other. After graduating from college, Anthony proposed to Megan, and they got married in a cozy ceremony surrounded by family and friends. After the wedding, Anthony and Megan decided to open a joint physiotherapy clinic in Connecticut. It was not an easy decision, requiring considerable effort and investment, but their perseverance and hard work quickly bore fruit. The clinic became a success, and the couple gained the respect of the local community. The patients appreciated their professionalism and caring attitude, and Anthony and Megan were proud of their contribution to the health and well-being of people. Their success at work has allowed them to start a new chapter in their personal lives. First, the couple had a son, Alec, then Tyler, and a few years later, little Zoe. Anthony and Megan raised their children with love and care, trying to give them the best. When the children grew up a little, the family decided to move to Celebration, Florida. This city, built according to the concept of an ideal community, has become a symbol of safety and comfort. Anthony and Megan wanted their children to grow up in a supportive environment, and Celebrity seemed like the perfect place for that. Neighbors described the Todts as a friendly and harmonious family. Anthony was a caring father who always found time for his children, despite his busy work schedule. Megan took care of the house and upbringing, creating comfort and maintaining the family spirit. The children were active, sociable, and cheerful, participated in school activities, and enjoyed life in their new home. At first glance, the Todt family was the embodiment of the American dream. A successful business, a beautiful home, loving parents, and happy children. Their lives seemed perfect. They traveled, spent time together, and created memories that seemed destined to stay with them forever. However, as is often the case, difficulties were hidden behind the facade of external well-being. Financial problems, accumulated debts, and emotional stress began to undermine their family from the inside. Anthony, who has always strived to be a support for his loved ones, faced challenges that proved beyond his strength. Despite the fact that neighbors and friends saw only the perfect picture, those who knew the family better began to notice the changes. Anthony became more withdrawn, and his mood often changed. Some colleagues noted that he looked tired and tense. Megan, who has always been cheerful and cheerful, seemed worried, although she tried to hide it. December 2019, on the eve of the holidays, has always been a special time for the Todt family. In previous years, they loved to decorate the house, put up a Christmas tree, and share photos with friends and relatives. However, This time it was different. For the first time in many years, the family stopped contacting. No calls, no messages, no updates on social media. A silence that alerted everyone who knew them. Megan's mother was the first to express concern. She was close to her daughter and used to communicate with her regularly, discuss family matters, and plan visits. But this time, despite all her efforts, she couldn't get in touch with Megan. The phone was turned off, and the messages remained unanswered. At first, the mother decided that the family could go on a trip or be busy preparing for the holidays. They were always active, especially at this time of the year, she later recalled. However, as the days passed, the silence persisted. It was strange, because even on vacation, Megan always found time to call. One of the most alarming signals was the lack of activity on social media. Megan loved to share moments of her life, posted photos of her children, and talked about family trips. Her profile was always filled with warmth and joy, but since the end of November, nothing new has appeared on her page. The neighbors who lived next to the Todt family in Celebration also began to notice the oddities. The usually busy house looked empty. The lights were off in the evenings, and mail and newspapers were piling up on the doorstep. No one saw any family members leaving or entering the house. By mid-December, the relatives began to actively try to find out what was going on. They called the neighbors, hoping to get at least some information, but no one could tell where the family was. Some of the neighbors suggested that the pillboxes might have gone away for the holidays, but this seemed unlikely, given their habit of communicating their plans. Relatives also began calling Anthony's clinic in Connecticut, where he continued to work until moving to Celebration. But even there, no one knew where he was. The clinic stopped accepting patients, which added even more questions. The financial difficulties faced by the family in recent months began to seem more serious. At the end of December, Megan's mother decided she couldn't wait any longer. She asked the police to check the Todt family home. She explained the situation in detail, emphasizing that her daughter never disappeared without warning, and the children were always in touch with relatives. The police accepted the statement and sent officers to check it. When they arrived at the house, they found the doors closed and everything was quiet inside. The officers knocked, but no one answered. The house looked empty, and there were no signs of violence or forced entry. The police visited the house again a few days later, but the situation had not changed. Without obvious signs of a crime, they could not enter without a warrant. However, the officers recorded the strange circumstances and continued to monitor the house. The relatives couldn't find a place for themselves. They knew that the family was facing financial problems. Anthony mentioned debts and business problems. However, no one thought that these difficulties could lead to something so serious. Megan's mother began to suspect that something terrible might have happened. The relatives also contacted their friends in Celebration to gather more information. They found out that the neighbors had not seen the family for a long time. Even the small children who always played outside did not appear in plain sight. This was further proof that the situation requires immediate intervention. Christmas passed without a single word from the Todt family. It was a particularly difficult time for the relatives. They are used to exchanging greetings, calls, and photos. This time, there was none of that. The silence became more and more frightening. Megan's mother continued to insist that the police check the house. She called the station almost daily, telling them about her suspicions and begging them to start a full-fledged investigation. Her voice became the decisive factor that forced law enforcement agencies to act. On January 13th, 2020, after several weeks of fruitless attempts to contact the Todt family, the police took drastic measures. The search warrant was issued not only because of alarming signals from relatives, but also as part of the investigation into financial fraud, which Anthony was suspected of. That morning, officers and federal agents headed to the Todt family home in Celebration. When they arrived at the house, they saw Anthony calmly walk inside, as if nothing unusual had happened. The officers went to the front door and knocked, but there was no response. After looking around carefully, they found that the door was unlocked. Deciding that there was no time to delay, they entered the house. When the police entered the house, they were immediately greeted by a fetid smell that filled the entire space. This smell was so strong that it couldn't be overlooked. It permeated every room as a reminder that a terrifying discovery was hiding somewhere inside. The officers described the atmosphere of the house as oppressive and ominous. The house looked empty, gloomy, and abandoned. The interior situation was in stark contrast to the family's reputation. Everything here looked as if life in this house had stopped a few weeks ago. The police noted that chaos reigned in the living room and kitchen. Dirty plates with leftovers lay on the tables and in the sink, and items of clothing, toys, and personal belongings were scattered all over the floor. At first glance, it could have been mistaken for an ordinary mess, but upon closer inspection, it became obvious that this chaos was of a different nature. The furniture seemed to remain in place, but there were traces of dust on some surfaces, indicating a long absence of care for the house. Mail and newspapers piled up at the front door, which confirmed the theory that the family had not left the house for several weeks. As the police officers moved inside the house, the smell became more and more unbearable. The police knew that the source of this smell was upstairs. As they climbed the stairs, they tried to move cautiously, not knowing what might await them behind the bedroom doors. The second floor was completely immersed in silence, which seemed especially disturbing. In one of the bedrooms, police found the bodies of Megan Todt, her 3 children, Alec, Tyler, and Zoe, and a dog named Bree. They were on the bed and on the floor, wrapped in blankets. Experts estimated that the family had died about 3 weeks before the discovery, which coincided with the beginning of December 2019, when relatives lost contact with them. Due to the passage of time, it was impossible to visually determine the causes of death. The room looked like time had stopped. There were family photos on the bedside table. Children's toys were scattered on the floor, creating an eerie contrast to what had happened here. Megan was lying on the bed, and Zoe's youngest daughter was next to her. On the other side of the bed were the bodies of the 2 older boys, Alec and Tyler. Bree's dog was found on the floor, closer to the door. This sight shocked the officers to the core. Even the most experienced of them later admitted that they had never seen anything like this in their practice. But what struck me most was that Anthony Todd was found in another room sitting on the couch. He looked haggard but completely calm. His behavior raised a lot of questions. How could he live in a house with the bodies of his family for several weeks? Why didn't he make any attempts to explain or hide what happened? The officers immediately arrested Anthony and took him out of the house. He did not protest and silently followed their instructions. This moment became the starting point for one of the most shocking investigations in the history of celebrity. Criminologists who arrived at the scene began work on collecting evidence. No signs of a struggle or forced entry were found in the house. This confirmed the version that everything happened inside the family without the participation of outsiders. Among the items found, special attention was drawn to packages of medicines and syringes, which, it was assumed, could be used to inject toxic substances. Even the most experienced officers could not remain indifferent to this terrible find. One of them later recalled, "I thought I saw everything, but it was something completely different. It's hard to realize that someone could do this to their own family." The house was immediately cordoned off, and the bodies were transferred to the morgue for autopsy. The crime scene became the object of close attention, not only of the police, but also of local residents who were shocked by the incident. The news of the discovery of the bodies in the Todd house quickly spread throughout Celebration and beyond. The neighbors, who knew the family as friendly and caring people, could not believe that such a tragedy was hidden behind the facade of well-being. The local community organized a spontaneous memorial at the house, bringing flowers and toys in memory of the dead children. During the first interrogation, Anthony stated that his wife Megan killed the children and then committed suicide. He tried to convince the police that he had found the bodies and was so shocked that he did not know what to do. However, this version quickly raised doubts among the investigators. No signs of a struggle were found on the children's bodies, and the situation in the house did not correspond to the version of suicide. However, the criminologists working in the house began to find evidence that clearly contradicted Anthony's words. A high content of antihistamine was found in the bodies of all the victims. This indicated that the victims had been injected with a toxic dose of medication to immobilize or put them to sleep. The forensic medical examination established that the cause of death of the victims were stab wounds. An interesting fact was the absence of signs of a struggle, which may indicate that the victims could not resist at the time of the attack. There were no signs of forced entry or a struggle in the house, which indicated that the crime was committed by someone who had access to the house. As part of a parallel investigation, it became known that Anthony was under investigation for fraud in the field of health insurance. His business in Connecticut went bankrupt, and he himself owed large sums of money. These circumstances could have led him to believe that he would not be able to provide for his family and decided to put them out of their misery. The collected evidence, including toxicological data, Anthony's contradictory testimony, and his financial situation, allowed investigators to conclude that he was the culprit of the tragedy. Anthony Todt was formally charged with murder, and the case was brought to court. After the family's bodies were discovered in a house in Celebration, Florida, Anthony was arrested, and the investigation focused on gathering evidence and motives. Court hearings were scheduled for 2020, but due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the trial was postponed for several months, which only increased public interest in the case. The charges against Anthony included 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of animal cruelty. The Osceola District Prosecutor's Office, where the trial took place, stated that it had irrefutable evidence of his guilt. The main task of the prosecution was to prove that the murders were carefully planned and not the result of a mental disorder. The defense, on the other hand, was preparing a line of defense based on allegations that Anthony suffered from delusions caused by severe stress and mental problems. His lawyers argued that he was confident that the end of the world was approaching and acted out of a desire to protect his family. The trial began on April 11, 2022 in the Osceola County Courthouse. The prosecutors provided a detailed chronology of the events that led to the tragedy, as well as key evidence gathered at the crime scene. Among the evidence presented, the results of the toxicological examination became one of the most significant. The analysis showed that all the victims were injected with Benadryl in a lethal dose before death. This indicated the carefully thought-out nature of the crime. The wounds found on the bodies also testified to the premeditation of the perpetrator's actions. However, the absence of signs of a struggle in the house and the testimony of neighbors confirmed that the victims did not try to resist. Anthony's post-arrest confessions played a key role in the case. During the interrogation, he stated that he killed his family to save their souls and protect them from the apocalypse, which he was sure was inevitable. The defense argued that Anthony was in a state of mental disorder and was unaware of his actions. They presented him as a caring father and husband who broke down under the pressure of financial difficulties and fear for his family. The lawyers also tried to cast doubt on Anthony's confession, claiming that he was under intense pressure during the interrogation. One of the most dramatic moments of the trial was the performance of Anthony Todd himself. At the hearing, he confirmed that he had indeed killed his family, but had done so to save them from suffering. Anthony claimed that he was convinced that the apocalypse was coming soon and believed that this was the only way he could protect his loved ones. "I loved my wife and children more than my life," he said in the courtroom. "Everything I did was out of love. I wanted to protect them from the torment that awaited us all." These words caused a shock among those present. Many saw his confession as an attempt to avoid more serious punishment, but the prosecutor's office and the jury took it as proof of his composure. During the trial, the court heard testimony from witnesses, including relatives and family friends. They described Anthony as a caring father and husband, but also noted that in recent months his behavior had become strange and restless. Medical experts have confirmed that the murders were carefully planned. According to their findings, Anthony first gave his family a lethal dose of medication to immobilize them, and then stabbed them to complete his plan. After several days of hearings and 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict. On April 14, 2022, Anthony Todt was found guilty on all counts of first-degree murder and cruelty to an animal. The judge sentenced him to life in prison, without the right to parole, noting in his conclusion, Anthony Todt betrayed those whom he was supposed to protect. His actions were not only cruel, but also deliberate. This sentence reflects the gravity of his crime. The trial of Anthony Todt was the culmination of an investigation that lasted more than 2 years. His confession in court, the evidence, and the testimony of witnesses left no doubt about his guilt. This verdict put an end to one of the most shocking family homicide cases in modern U.S. history. The story of the Todt family, which began as an example of the embodiment of the American dream, ended in a tragedy that shocked not only the residents of Celebration, but the whole country. This case has become not just a criminal case, but also a catalyst for public discussion about mental health, family conflicts, and the importance of timely support. The trial of Anthony Todt has revealed the hidden depths of personal and family problems that led to one of the most shocking crimes in modern U.S. history. Celebration, known as a peaceful and safe town where harmony reigns, found itself at the center of a horrific crime. Local residents, shocked by the tragedy, could not believe for a long time that such cruelty could happen in their community. The Todt family home, which was previously associated with warmth and joy, became a reminder of the tragedy. Neighbors began leaving flowers, candles, and toys at the gate to honor the memory of Megan, Alec, Tyler, Zoe, and Bree's dog. Neighbors admitted that, despite the outward well-being of the family, they did not notice any alarm signals that could indicate an impending catastrophe. Many of them began to wonder how they could have missed the warning signs. This case has caused a profound rethinking of the importance of communication and support within communities. The public and experts drew attention to the key factors that led to the tragedy. The financial difficulties of the Todt family, Anthony's stress, and his belief in the imminent apocalypse became the main topics of discussion. This case has become another proof of how mental problems can escalate into something more dangerous if they are not diagnosed in time. The media actively covered the case, raising questions about the impact of financial pressure and mental health on family relationships. Many publications focused on how the seemingly ideal family life hid the growing problems. Psychologists and social workers use this story as an example of why it is necessary to pay attention to early signs of stress and instability in the behavior of loved ones. Relatives and friends of the Todt family decided not to dwell on the tragedy, but to make a lesson out of it for others. They founded a charitable foundation that supports families facing mental health problems, financial difficulties, and domestic violence. This foundation has become a kind of memorial to Megan, Alec, Tyler, Zoe, and Bree. Its goal is to prevent such tragedies by providing timely assistance and education. At the local level, the tragedy has led to the creation of initiatives aimed at supporting families with children. Educational programs have begun in schools and public organizations that teach recognition of signs of depression, anxiety, and other mental disorders. Additional resources have also been introduced to advise families who are facing financial or psychological problems. The story of Anthony Todt and his family was not only a tragedy, but also a warning. She reminded the society of how important it is to pay attention to mental health, even if outwardly everything seems to be fine. Financial difficulties and fear of the future can have a devastating effect on people, which is especially dangerous if they do not receive the necessary support. Many experts emphasized that neighbors, friends, and relatives of the Todt family could have played a key role in preventing the tragedy if they had paid attention to Anthony's strange behavior. This story has become an important reminder that asking a question on time or offering help can save someone's life. The story of the Todt family, which began as a fairy tale, has become one of the darkest examples of family destruction under the pressure of internal and external problems. The tragedy has shown how important it is to be attentive to those around us and not be afraid to seek help. The memory of the victims of this tragedy will live on in the hearts of those who knew them. Their deaths have become a catalyst for changes aimed at preventing such tragedies. The Todt family's story reminds us that even the brightest facades can hide deep cracks that cannot be ignored.